Hello, Tari. Hello, everybody who might be listening later. So, this is our week 3 live session, and today's agenda includes the following. I do want to go over the discussions. There seems to be some issues, with answering the questions and things like that. So, just want to make sure these are the easiest I believe, in my opinion, points that you can get. So, why not get them all? I'm going to go over some of the PI tools, not all of them. And then maybe I'll pick a couple of problems in mortality, autopsy, and morbidity rates, and any other questions that might come up. All right, does it sound good? All right, good. So regarding the discussions, this class is a little bit different from the others. I know that you guys are used to just, okay, let me pick whatever questions and then I'll throw in my 2 cents there. The the design of this class is a bit different. So you have to learn to adjust with what the requirements are, not what I'm used to and what's easy and convenient for me. And this is not addressed to an individual particularly, okay? I'm saying these for everyone just to make sure that we understand each other. I believe I have communicated via messages, but I thought I'll just put this on our live session today. So the main goal in the discussion area for you should be to show your professor and show to each other that you know the course content. And what does the course content involve? Pretty much everything that is listed under the assignment area. What about the course objectives? Again, the course objectives that are listed in this case in week 3. So the questions that are selected for discussions are designed that way so they can hit in multiple angles. Okay, it's not just one thing, give me a definition, or what is this and what is that. For example, in last week's discussion, you were asked to compare and contrast clinical quality, utilization management, and risk management, but then go deeper into one of them, have discuss one of them in greater detail, and then try to connect that to our profession and see how we could contribute to that particular function that you chose, that you selected. Okay, so that was one topic. And then the second topic was just a little bit different, trying to make use of the different measures that we use, and particularly for last week, length of stay or occupancy rates, and how are they used in terms of utilization management, at the hospital. So the key should be to understand both questions, to take, to take a good look at all the different parts of it. And then once you do this and okay, this is what I'm going to do for this week, this is the focus of this week is, these 3 functions. I really need to nail them down. So then you can plan your study time. How many pages am I going to read tonight? How many pages am I going to read the next day? And so on. And then be ready by Wednesday, earlier preferred, but at least by Wednesday to get your first post in. Now, there are occasions when you're busy, life gets in the way and all of that, and you are not fully ready. And I understand that. So let's say that you can only start the post, and let's say that you only had time to discuss utilization management. Then fine, then go in and post that. But then remember that you don't have a complete post yet. You have to go back and complete that. And that's not an additional post, that's your first post which you did not complete the first time. Okay, so please be aware of that. You need to really respond to the questions fully, all parts of it. The other recommendation I have is that students sometimes will type in just bullet points or whatever comes through their mind, incomplete sentences. I recommend that you type it in your Word document as a Word document and then post it in the discussions. Or even as you're studying, you might be thinking of something, a little scenario, but you're not quite ready to have a complete post. Write it down. Write it type it in a Word document, save it. You can save it as HIT 226 discussions, and then you'll have it there. And then you can refer to it even when you study for your review for your final exam. So it doesn't go to waste. The more you write about things that you're learning and you're reading, the better prepared you will be and the more you will remember. Okay? And I keep saying do not copy and paste. And I still see a little bit of that. So please try to avoid that as much as possible. At this level, you should not have more than 20% of your post, copied and pasted. When I say copy and paste, yes, sometimes it's literally copy and paste. I can even see the links going straight where you got it from. But sometimes it's just reading it from the book on one screen and then typing it in the other, which again doesn't show me that you understand actually what you're writing. Okay, try to add the details, because if you just write utilization management is a function of quality management and it focuses on making sure that the patient gets their necessary level of care. Yeah, right, but give me something more. That is just the start of it. That's the introduction. Now tell me that you really know the details, what other activities fit into it and what they involve. Okay? Um, if you can't identify details, there are some individuals are more um, likely to pick on details than others. It's just life. Although in HIT, we prefer that you're detail oriented. But let's say that you just can't find enough details about something and you only wrote a couple of sentences in your post, and that's not telling much whether you know the weekly content or not. Then follow up with another question. I try to post as many questions as I can. You can work on a problem. You don't have to respond to everything I'm posting, but give it a try to something. Okay? Even don't think of the discussions as just a burden to get points. Think of it as your learning tool, as your mode of communication with each other and with your professor. That's how you'll get the most of it. Okay. And if you follow up throughout the week, you will see that I post the reviews, I post summaries, I post problems and hints and answers to your questions or to somebody else's questions. And at some point, they will be handy, trust me, especially as you take your quiz or your final exam. All right. Any questions on this? Okay. Moving on to the overview of PI tools. So this week's focus is the performance improvement process, but then specifically, what tools and techniques do we use typically in quality management? So just as a reference, I put here the team-based PI process. So that typically starts with identifying an opportunity for improvement and then moving to researching and defining what are the performance expectations and designing and redesigning process education, and then implementing process or educate people, and then last, document and communicate findings. So I'm going to go through this by bringing up an example. So here's an example that's actually a real scenario. Okay, so let's say that at the hospital there was an admission, a woman who did not speak English, and she was pregnant, third pregnancy, had two children, healthy, and she's admitted, goes into labor, and then the child is born. Somehow she manages to communicate to the nurse and the staff that she had a sexually transmitted disease. However, there had been no issue with her prior children. Okay, so basically, that information is not understood correctly, and the staff is panicking that the child now might be infected or might be having the problem, a really serious health problem. So what happens is that they notify, of course, the doctor. The doctor is trying to follow up and try to identify the proper protocol here, and he even contacts the Office of Public Health, and they determine to give the child a certain medication that would prevent any complications from this disease. Medication is ordered, goes through the pharmacy, and then the nurses will administer the medication. Unfortunately, the child dies. So what happens here? The newborn dies here. It's a very sad story. So what had happened is that, first of all, um, well, I'm not first of all. I'm going to pick up at the middle of this, and then as we go through the PI tools, then we'll illustrate the other aspects. So we have the doctor handwriting the order, and the order goes to the pharmacy. The order has the name of the medication as well as the dose and the route. Okay, that's the typical information that goes in an order. Um, Unfortunately, the pharmacist read CC, the term CC, as 00 because of the not clear handwriting. Okay, so now the baby is getting 100 times the dose that the baby is supposed to. Okay, then the nurses get this. They do question the dose and say, oh my God, this is really a large dose for an infant. And with the syringes that they typically use for the infants, for the newborns, that would mean that they would have to inject, the baby 5 times. Okay, so rather than doing that, they feel bad about that, but they don't question the dose. They don't raise any other flags. They decide to put it through an IV and not as an intramuscular. And that goes in. The idea was to not have to puncture the baby 5 times. Okay, but then the medication goes in through the IV and the baby dies. So a bunch of issues here. The medication should have never gotten through IV. It should have been as going through as intramuscular. Then most importantly, it was 100 times the dose that it should have been. And then as it turns out to be, the the, the disease was actually never transmitted to the baby. The woman had that issue at some point in the past, and because of poor communication, it was not understood correctly that the baby actually did not even have that disease to begin with. Okay, so a lot of issues here. And at the end of the day, we're not talking about the legal aspects for this particular lecture. I chose the scenario, but I'm going to focus on just the performance improvement process here. Okay, so what are the opportunities for improvement? That's the first step. Identify them. How do you identify that? Definitely, you can have here the group of people, and it's always team based. Okay, you can have the nurses, you can have the physicians involved, even the person from the Office of Public Health that was involved, people in registration, anybody that handles communication or interpretation services that were lacking. Okay, so they could actually have a brainstorming session together and trying to find out what went wrong. And that's where you would have seen there popping up the communication, the documentation inaccuracies, because that's what happened with the handwritten documentation, with lack of confirmations on both sides, from the pharmacy, from the public health, from the nurses. Okay, so then you could actually look at this scenario, at this case, and try to refine and research performance expectations. Definitely the performance expectation would be, all right, we don't want people to die because of medication errors. That is the expectation. So how, and that's the next step, then we go in design and redesign process and educate people. How do we go about designing a better system and educating people? There's two aspects to this, so that we can actually improve this from happening and not let this happen again. Okay, so we can look at this from a two-pronged approach. Okay, so from one side we have the design. So what can help prevent a situation like this? Perhaps if a computerized physician order entry was in place, and that goes to the electronic and information systems aspect, that's also part of the readings for this week. Well, so perhaps if we had that in place, the the issue with the CCs and the zeros, the dosing and the routing and all of that would not have been an issue to begin with. Okay, So that is part of that structure. And if that is redesigned, you have a new system in place, it forces the everybody there to actually follow it and to question it. Then there is education. You see process and you see education as well. And in this, so you have the system in place, and then you have a new process designed, a new flow of actions. From the moment this is ordered, if it's an infant, it should be double checked. If it's, if the dose is questionable, it should be double checked. Or if this is done, it should be monitored, or whatever the case is. Okay, so that's a process, and then you educate people to actually follow that process, and then you put it in place, you implement it. And now, as you start implementing it, you're going to start documenting, and then hopefully, find that things have been improved. And the communication of these findings is done via, meetings or um, email communication, and all of those forms that are used in today's workplace. So does that put the PI process in a better perspective? Tari? And if you have other questions, please feel free to ask. Okay, so I'm going to focus now on a few of the PI tools and techniques that can be used in this scenario, and then perhaps other scenarios. So if we're looking at everybody is clear on check sheets and data abstracts, so I listed it here because there are good PI tools, but I'm not going to waste time on that for right now. And brainstorming, we just talked about. I'm going to talk a little bit about the root cause analysis and FMEA and force field analysis. Okay, these last three. So in this case of the newborn baby that died, we have identified a number of issues. So we started with affinity, with brainstorming, right? So those issues could have been related, like as we said, to registration and communication, could have been maybe physician related, nursing related. Okay, so part of the root cause analysis is actually trying to group your thoughts together. The tool that helps you do that is affinity grouping. Okay, so affinity grouping means that you have to group things that are alike together. So if in the discussion and this meeting where people are brainstorming and sharing ideas, they say, okay, well, physicians should have put the order more clearly. And they say, well, physicians should have made it clear that this medication should not be given in a different route. Okay, well, these are two things that are related to physicians. So based on affinity grouping, you put them together. Okay, or if it says, this was the pharmacist's fault, they should have double checked, they should have questioned the dose. Okay, and that would be a pharmacy issue. Or maybe the nurses should have double checked, should have, questioned the dose. The nurses should have checked the route. And for the age of the baby and all of that, and that goes under nursing issues. So you're getting the groups of ideas, and that's done by affinity grouping. And then from there, you put them in this root cause analysis, which is also considered to be a fishbone diagram. I didn't put the fishbone diagram here. It is in your textbook on page 1010. I'm sorry, on page 587. It's figure 10.10. Okay, so you're trying to look at all of these aspects and trying to figure out what was really, the cause of the problem here. That's what root cause analysis means. Okay, there is another method that's very valuable out there: failure mode effect analysis. Okay, so FMEA stands for failure mode effect. So you're putting yourself into a situation where you think, okay, there might be a failure here, as it happened in this case with the baby. So you put yourself in the mode of failure, and then you say, okay, what can be done that can avoid this from happening? Okay, so that's the idea of the failure mode effect analysis. So if we know that the bigger risk comes from medication administration, then maybe our solution should be definitely nursing education. and maybe barcoding to double check dose and double check patient. It could be sometimes people give medications to the wrong patients, right? Okay. But if we see that perhaps the biggest danger here is the inaccuracies in documentation of orders, that's where the failure point might be, then based on this method, failure mode effect analysis, then you're going to try to figure out a way to definitely avoid that. And perhaps going with computerized physician order entry might be a solution. Okay, and definitely education that comes with it. Is that making sense, Tari? So how we're using, a certain method to, based on the scenario that you have, trying to think out loud of the possible areas where things might go wrong and preventing them. Okay, good. Um, this is the type of analysis that I'm expecting here, and at some point you might be asked to do in the final exam, by the way. So pay attention to this and think a little bit outside the box. Think as if you were, as this was your own situation to deal with. Okay, that's how you make better decisions. Um, Force field analysis is nothing more than trying to weigh the pros and the cons. For example, in this case, that could have been used. Okay, so do I give the medication or do I not give the medication? So the pros would be, okay, then I'm preventing the baby, from da da da. But then the con would be, well, no, this is too risky. The nurse could have done that and say, well, there's more issues, potential issues. If I'm questioning this and I am a clinician after all, then, and I see that there's more cons than pros, then I should definitely query the physician first. Okay, because the dose seems too high, the route seems questionable. It usually doesn't happen that we have to puncture a baby 5 times. So then there's more cons than pros. Maybe we should take this a step further and not just simply abide by the orders. Okay, and you do that in other situations too. If we can lighten the situation up here and say, okay, it's just a matter of maybe um, selecting a system, and you're trying to improve the quality, in your department, and perhaps to do that you need a new information system. Then get the information system, think about all the pros or the advantages and the good things that will come with it, the benefits of it, and also think of the potential pitfalls, potential issues that might come by implementing that. And that would be a force field analysis, how you're doing that, and trying to compare the pros and cons, really, the advantages and disadvantages, and see which one weighs more. Okay? Um, and stop me if you have any questions. And now for the other ones, I'm only going to focus a little bit on these statistic tools and the data collection analysis, because that's your basis for your week 5 assignment. You're going to work with graphs in week 5 assignment. And there's a number of ways to present data. And your book goes through run charts and control charts and histograms and pie charts and all of those. Okay, so that's what this is referring to partially. We use these graphs to make, the idea is to analyze the data. We will talk about graphs again in week 5 in a sense of how you present the data. For now, we're looking at them in terms of being able to analyze the data. In week 1, for example, one way to analyze the data for you guys was the Excel, trying to go with the formula that are there, and making sure that you are analyzing the data correctly in terms of the average age of those patients, the mode, mean, and all of that. Okay, there's other tools that are used. For example, when you look at the hospital and the monitors that they use, they have a monitoring system that are set perhaps to beep at a certain level. Okay, so that would be a control chart, and it's helping the nurses and the physicians make a decision. If, let's say, the blood pressure goes up pretty high above the threshold, or very low below the threshold, then there's going to be a beep. Okay, so that's the idea of the control chart. Okay, um, there will be other tools, other types of graphs that will be discussed again in week 5. For now, I really want you to focus on these, okay? Um, and try to think of how they can be used to understand and analyze the data better. Are there any particular tools that you want me to explain a little more? I wasn't planning on going through all of them one by one because, some of them are pretty straightforward in the book, I think. I'm just hoping this will put things in perspective. All right, that's good. Thank you, Tari. Okay. And then for the others who might be listening to this later, if there is a particular tool that you're not really understanding, then just feel free to ask in the discussion area. Okay, so mortality, autopsy, and morbidity rates. This week, we're going to go through chapter 6, 7, and 8 in your Horton's textbook. And these are actually discussed in John's textbook as well. By the way, the formula and everything, the way they're calculated is the same in both textbooks. But Horton's textbook is preferred because it has more examples. It shows you how, problem is solved. In my opinion, it's more clear. Tari, have you used both? Do you have any comments on that? Is Horton's textbook helpful in terms of the exercises and problems we work with? You do. Okay. Again, for the statistical piece, and when it comes to the other aspects, talking about the PI and all of that, the performance improvement process, it goes back to sales textbook. Okay, so these are the types of problems I want everybody to master this week, and I put them in the review sheet. I believe all of these death rates, autopsy rates, and other disease and condition rates. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to stop the PowerPoint. The next slide, by the way, is just Q&A. So if you have any questions, think of that. And I'm going to stop sharing this, like I said, and I will bring up a Word document. First of all, I'm going to show you the media gallery. Has everybody checked out week 3 media tools that are there? There's 3 videos that are about calculating gross and net death rates. So that's right there. Then there is another one on calculating gross and net autopsy rates, and then a third video on C-sections and some other rates. Has everybody checked on that? Okay, well, in this case, have you, Tari, checked? Not yet. Okay, so to avoid duplicating the information and making use of our time better, I'm not going to go over things that I have explained there. Okay. I am going to, okay, give me just a second here. I'm going to share with you this area. Okay. Do you see the list of videos? And by the way, you can sort them alphabetical, and that probably makes it a little easier. And then you can also do a detailed view like that and just scroll. So week 1 videos, week 2 videos, week 3 videos, and week 4. So you see here the C-section and some other rates, gross and net autopsy, and gross and net death rates. What I'm going to go over is actually calculating fetal death rates, okay, and hospital adjusted autopsy rates. These were the 2 problems I was planning, unless you have a question about another one. Is that okay? Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is go to our RHIT formula. That should guide you, everybody, as you're working on these problems. Have you found these useful? Let me check the checkbox here. Okay, So what are we looking for here? We're looking for fetal death rate. Okay, so death rates right here. We have gross, post-op rate, anesthesia, maternal, newborn, and if you scroll down, fetal death rate. Okay, so right here, this one that I highlighted in blue. So it's equal to total number of intermediate and or late fetal deaths for a period of time, and that's divided by the total number of live births plus intermediate and late fetal deaths for the period. So when we calculate fetal deaths, it's important to separate between early fetal deaths and the intermediate and late fetal deaths. They're simply calculated differently. In the first trimester, it's considered an early fetal death, and that's yeah, for statistical purposes is different. And the intermediate and late, they are in the second and the third trimester. Okay, so let's look at in a problem right now. So do you see my screen? I have a Word document up here. Okay, so let's see. Our problem says, so we have a hospital that had let's do 150 live births. Okay, and then for this period of time, first of all, let's specify the period of time here. This is done in the month of April, and we have the number of live births. We also know that intermediate and fetal deaths were 4, and early fetal deaths were 2. Okay, so what do we want to calculate? Fetal death rate. Okay, so fetal death rate is equal to, and we go back to our formula right here, the total number of intermediate and or late fetal deaths. So straight from the formula, so we're getting the total number of intermediate and fetal death rates. What is it? You have it right here. Okay, so it's 4. Very good. All right. And then that is divided by the total. Let me show you both screens for a moment here, right? That is divided by the total number of live births plus intermediate and late fetal deaths. So what would that number at the bottom be? We have the total number of births, which is what? 150. Very good. And plus 4. Yes. Okay. And then finally, and I need to put some other, let me insert some other brackets here. This bracket, because, at the end, we're going to actually multiply it by 100 to turn it into a percentage, right? Okay. So the next thing you can do is you bring up your calculator function in your computer, or if you have a calculator, then you can just, right here, there's a calculator. So 4 divided by 154, and that gives us 0.02597. Now, with death rates, we recommend that you actually carry on those decimal points, okay, because we do want to show that level of detail. So here, it's going to be 0.0259, okay? 0.0259, and then times 100. Every time when you multiply by 100, all you have to do is reposition the decimal point 2 positions to the right. So this would be what? 2.59, and then you have to put the percentage sign, right? That's how you do it, Tari, right? Okay. All right. So There were a couple of details here. I missed my bracket here. I apologize for that. So let me just put my bracket. Okay, so one more time here. So we had the total number of intermediate and fetal deaths, 4. And then our denominator was the potential deaths. Now, let's focus on this a little bit because people get confused all the time with the denominator. The denominator is the actual potential. How many um, infants could have died? The way this is defined is pretty much everybody that was in development, from the second trimester on, right? So that would include the intermediate and fetal deaths. And that's why we add those 150 plus 4. Now, the other piece I want to point out is that you see there's a number there that we did not use, 2. Early fetal deaths equals 2. We did not even need that. And you will see that in a number of problems, we may not need the number of, certain figures that are given. And you might say, well, why do they give them to us, to complicate things? Well, because in reality, you do have a bunch of figures and numbers you're faced with, and depending on what you need to calculate, you need to pull those that you need, right? Does that help? Okay. So, any questions on this one? It seems pretty straightforward, but you'd wonder, many people often miss these little things, sometimes the little details. And for this one, let me just bring the calculator one more time, 25, because I could have actually made a little error here. Let me just correct myself. We had a 7 here after the 9. Okay, so I'm going to carry that on and then bring it up here. I'm glad sometimes you learn from doing certain mistakes. Okay, so we have 0.2597. And because now we truncated it, right? We actually multiplied by 100. We had 259. Actually, this is rounded because 7 is greater than 4, and it makes this a 10. So this is actually 2.6 at this point. Okay? So in Excel, if you were to round things in Excel, it does it automatically. But in these cases, I said I was going to carry a bunch of numbers, and I actually forgot to put the 7 after the 9. So one more time, as you're doing your calculations, carry on a few digits, okay? Leave them there because you can round it at the very end. When you turn it into a percentage, at that point, you can do the rounding and you leave it to 2 decimal points. Okay? Are early fetal deaths ever calculated? They may be. They may be. For the purpose of this week, you will not have to calculate them. But if they were, how would you calculate them? Well, basically, the number of early fetal deaths is the actual, right? And then what is the potential? Every pregnancy really is the potential. That's what it gets down to. So out of, let's say, 100 women, let's say we have 100 women pregnant, and 5 of them miscarry the baby during the first 3 months. What's the early fetal death rate? It would be 5 out of 100, right? Make sense? Okay. All right. Let's look into another type of problem, adjusted hospital autopsy rate. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down here. And then here's my formula. I'm trying to keep, you can still see the 2 portions of the screen, right? I'm going to bring it up. Just wanted to bring up the formula a little bit. Okay, hold on. So do you see part my Word document, and then underneath you still see the formula, right? Okay, so here's a problem that we are going to work with. So let's say that hospital X has, let's say, 500 discharges in January. Okay, Let me add the L here. And then what else do we need? Um, well, let's say that they had 10 deaths during this period of time, 10 deaths in January. And then they also did 5 autopsies performed. Okay? Now, there was a county coroner case. So that case, coroner case 1, given to county coroner. Okay? Let me push this down. Coroner case. All right? And then in another piece of information, this hospital actually took care of patients on an outpatient basis. They also had people in hospice. Some hospitals have a wing, that's kind of dedicated to hospice patients, or sometimes they might have a rehab unit. It's in that same building of the hospital, but when it comes to actually how they're built and the level of service is different. Okay, so let's say that they had 2 patients that died in hospice and then were brought for autopsy. Okay? Now, what is the adjusted hospital autopsy rate? Okay? So, this is the information we have. I'm going to make this yellow just to make it a little easier to identify. Okay. So, what are we looking for? Adjusted hospital autopsy rates are just a little bit, maybe not that difficult, but maybe a little twisted, okay? Because what happens here is they count every autopsy that was done in the hospital. So as you look at down here at the formula sheet, you see adjusted hospital autopsy rate is equal to total hospital autopsies, and then that's divided by the total number of deaths of hospital patients whose bodies were available for autopsy. Okay, so what is our number of autopsies here? What do you think is the total number of autopsies? We have 5 performed, right? And then 2 from hospice that were brought in for autopsy. Very good. So 5 plus 2. Okay? Let me put these in parentheses. All right? And then we can actually multiply this by 100 right here, so I can avoid the addition of those other brackets. And then what do you think our denominator is? So it is total number of deaths of hospital patients whose bodies are available for autopsy. So we had 10 deaths these were inpatients, right? They died in the hospital, but then we had 2 others that actually died while they were in hospice. Very good, 12. So I'm going to break this down again. 10 deaths plus the 2 that were brought in that died, as hospice patients. So this ends up being equal to 700 divided by 12. So I bring up my calculator again. 700 divided by 12, and that's 58.33%. Now, with the autopsy rates, you can expect them to be high. Don't expect them to be like the death rates. Death rates, ideally, they are like in the very low percentages, single digits. Okay? Hopefully 0 point something, sometimes 1 point, 2 point, 3 point something. Okay? So usually you expect those to be low. Why? Because if you think about the formula and the way they're calculated, it's the number of patients who died out of all the patients who went there. And ideally, you don't want that number to be high. And it's typically not high, at least, under the care that is provided in our hospitals. However, with the autopsies, the potential is those who died. So the number of deaths is usually low, but the autopsies, are usually comparable to the number of deaths. So you would expect that number to be high. Is that making sense? All right. So that's all you would have to do in this problem. You actually did not have to do anything with the coroner's case because it was already taken out. And sometimes it's done differently. Okay. It depends on how, you really have to read the problem carefully, and the way, the language and the sentence matters a lot. In this case, this was not part of those autopsies performed. It was given to the coroner county, and that was it. Okay? Okay.